This is our Square Deal video 3, and this one is on protection, redistribution, and moral hazard. So let's think about where this puts us on the perpetual journey, right, of the march of freedom in the United States. So again, we start with the truths that all men are created equal and have the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in 1776, it's as if we say, people have value, and we're not tools of hereditary aristocrats. 1791, it's the Bill of Rights. We're like, you know what? We have value in ourselves. We don't get our rights from the country. They're there, and the country ought to respect those rights. And so the minority is not subject to the tyranny of the majority. A majority can't enslave a minority just by passing laws. There have to be protections for the minority. 1865, 66, 67, 68, people have inherent value and are not the tools of another race. Right? That's an addition that furthers the statements of the Declaration and the Constitution. And then the Square Deal is another move, right? It's another important move. We read about the coal mine owner who was like, you know what? Would we have all this if God didn't want us to? We're really the agents of God on this earth, and we have all this money, and God must want us to, and so we'll keep making it, right? So the Square Deal is really an attempt to safeguard people from oligarchs and plutocrats, from hyper-wealthy businessmen who warp the economy to make sure that only that same handful of people keep making all the money. So, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and that group in 1776, they were fighting the notion that hereditary aristocrats really ran the show and everybody was sort of a tool of theirs. And now Teddy Roosevelt realizes that the hereditary aristocrats are gone, but we're at risk of having sort of economic aristocrats who have gamed the system for their own advantage and are using the workers of the country and not respecting their rights to health, their rights to, have enough money from their labor to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And, he's guaranteeing that. So let's drill down on the Square Deal and ask if it's a good legislation or a good plan. So a couple issues that I want us to think about. On the one hand, it's the squareness of the deck we inherited, right? So he's saying, you know what, there's going to be a square deal. Nobody's going to tamper with those cards while I watch. So the question of, are those cards square before we start looking at them? And then on the other hand, something called moral hazard, which we will define here in a second. Another way, you could put it in the language of rights. In a sense, people's rights get expanded by the Square Deal. So everybody now has the right to enjoy America's natural beauty and majesty through the national parks and sanctuaries and monuments. Those can't be just bought by rich people to be enjoyed by a handful of rich people. Everybody has a right to a safe workplace. Everybody has a right to safe food and safe consumer products. And everybody has a right to compete free of monopolies, both in business and labor. So that's the movement forward on this journey of freedom and equality in the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the United States. So I want us to think about whether the deck is a square deck, whether it's enough to just not let J.P. Morgan or Cornelius Vanderbilt or whoever screw with the market and to make sure that the guy on the shop floor working his 12-hour day who has unsafe working conditions now has safe working conditions. Like, is that enough? What if the deck, by the time we got it, was hopelessly screwed up in the first place? Just as an example, just try to imagine that you are the son of Cherokee parents and you live on a reservation in Oklahoma, and your parents are alcoholics and their ancestors were forced off their land that their ancestors had for hundreds of years in North Carolina in the 1830s, part of the Trail of Tears. And here you are, and you don't have good education, and you don't have good nutrition, and you're clueless, and people look down on you, and that's the hand you're dealt. And is making sure that the cards weren't tampered with while we were watching, right? That nobody's keeping that kid from a job that he's qualified for instance, right? As an example. But like, what about why he's not qualified for a job in the first place? And so I want us to think about that, right? What if the deck has already been tampered with before the cards are dealt, way, way back, before we even were safeguarding the cards? The other side of the problem is moral hazard. What if you go further than, let's say, we do say that, wow, it seems like the square deal is not quite enough, that it should be more of a fair deal, right? As opposed to just a square deal where you get the cards you're dealt. What if you're dealt a 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 mixed suit hand? Like, that's not going to win, right? And that's the hand you're dealt, and you're the Cherokee kid on the reservation. So that's one side of the issue. The other side is what we call moral hazard. What if you do try to help? What if you do try to redistribute? And out of the normal course of life, you give somebody something. Like let's say you send the Cherokee boy enough money to compensate for, so he could go to school if he wanted, or that he would just have more money to buy stuff or whatever, right? You just give somebody something that they haven't earned in traditional ways, meaning well, right? Like you really want to help them. But moral hazard is like when you become addicted to that gift. And a lot of people have the tendency to become addicted to gifts when the gifts keep coming in the mail, especially if you never even meet the person giving you the gift. It's called an entitlement. You just become that you feel you're entitled to that gift coming all the time. And so often it can have the opposite effect that was intended, where you addict somebody to the basic goods of life, and they never learn the higher goods of life that we're trying to teach y'all about working and making and building and taking on more and more and a bigger and bigger share of the good of all people on your own shoulders, right? So that's moral hazard. So of these two issues, that the deck is already unsquare when we start watching it to ensure that it's square, versus moral hazard, the tendency of people to take for granted what they're given that they didn't work for. Which of these does Teddy Roosevelt, based on what the policies end up being, which one of these does he think is the more important of the two problems that needs to be respected? And then you give it some thought yourself. Really give it some thought. What about what are we going to do about the Cherokee kid on the reservation in Oklahoma? Is he getting what he should get? Does he have genuine freedom to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Is he being treated equally in the sense that you're being treated? And I'm curious as to what you think about that. So takeaways for this video: you should be able to name 4 rights that the Square Deal adds to American life. You should be able to describe in your own words the problem of whether any deck of life possibilities is ever really square at all. Give that a good explanation and think through. Define moral hazard and explain in your own words why it is a potential problem of government intervention in civic life. And explain in your own words how the Square Deal is more worried about the risks of moral hazard than the question of the true squareness of the deck. All right, so we will go from there.